Linwood,
Hello.
you've created one of the most beloved sitcoms of all time. Were you surprised that the audience wanted more after 20 years and that did not silence at all throughout that time?
No, it wasn't like surprised that people wanted to do it. I mean, it's existing IP. It's, kind of like in a lot of circumstances, it's what's wrong with entertainment, is the over reliance on existing material and sort of regurgitating stuff again. And it was more about I was surprised that I was able to find a way I wanted to do it. One of the nice things about the first show, the success of it, is I didn't have to work anymore. I could actually comfortably stop and do other things I was interested in. And so I didn't feel a need to get back out there and try and do another show and then try and do another one and it was like I enjoyed my retirement from show business quite a bit.
When you closed that chapter and Malcolm was done that first run, did you think you were ever going to revisit it?
I didn't. I felt like I was out of ideas. The situation I was in, if you imagine you're at a cocktail party or something and everyone is just paying attention to you and listening to you, and you're just sort of like really charming and, look, your stories are going over great. And if you get that for like a half hour straight, you run out of stories, you run out of ideas, and you're just sort of begging for someone else to come in.
Because at that time, you're doing 20 plus episodes a season.
Yeah.
When does that fatigue of okay, we ran out of all these ideas, is that like season 2, 3, 4?
No, it was because we got 10 people working on it together.
Writing the show.
Yeah, writing the show. And, we worked really hard on coming up with ideas and polishing the ideas and getting them wired up before we ever started writing a script. But again, after 7 years, even 10 people get out of ideas for the same situation, especially.
Right.
For the same characters. And
can we go back to the beginning? When you were first auditioning for the family, what stuck out about Frankie Muniz amongst the other kids who were all being cast?
It was so right. We didn't even question it we didn't really analyze what's great about him. He was charming. He was really funny and he was really natural. He didn't seem, kid actors are very, very divisive.
In what way? Like you have it or you don't?
Well, some people really like kid actors that, do the Shirley Temple thing where they're just sort of, it's very artificial and everything's very big and loud and cheerful and, and other people like it to be a little more grounded. And I kind of like both. What I liked about Frankie and what everyone knew was required was somebody who could be very, very real and still be funny. And also all these technical demands of the part to be able to look at the camera and not break character and still stay in the moment. Like he was, a character that had to be terrified for his life and then look in the camera, this completely artificial thing and still maintain that when he was saying whatever he was saying to the camera. And that's tough for adults to do.
Did you see a little of yourself in Frankie? Because Malcolm is kind of is your life.
Yeah, it was based on my child, a completely self-serving and exaggerated version of my childhood. Frankie he wasn't like me when I was a kid, but he knew how to do that character, the sort of belligerence and, he really understood what it was like to be perceiving stuff that he wasn't supposed to perceive. And that he wasn't taken seriously.
Because he was a smarter than average kid?
He was a smarter than average kid and could just sort of see things that were happening that adults didn't expect him to understand. And also weren't really interested in, his opinion or viewpoint, which is appropriate. I'm not going to take political advice from a 9-year-old. But he just inhabited the part so completely and knew how to do a joke and knew how to do the technical demands. And it was a very easy choice for everyone. And I tell the story a lot. You know, we had geared up for a nationwide manhunt, you know, and a lot of people, and you know, the people paying for it and me and my partners were all like, you know, this all evaporates if we can't find a kid. And that's going to be almost impossible to find a kid who can do all this.
And you weren't going to settle for something less than perfect?
It wouldn't work. You know, it would be kind of awful, you know, if you didn't have a kid you believed was in this situation and that you believed had the emotions that this character was supposed to be feeling, because otherwise it would have been like a weird kiddie show.
Because in season 1, Malcolm was pretty much the anchor. As the show went on, it became more of the ensemble.
Yeah, I mean, which if you have a good ensemble, that's what happens.
Where you can just bounce ideas. Oh, this person's story is this. They're the lead on this episode.
Yeah, someone has something that happened to them or happened to their, you know, friend or their cousin. It's like, you know what? That's a really good Reese story. You know, those kind of things.
What's up, guys? Real quick, an announcement from the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. These are one of the drinks that I saw somebody order and I immediately had to look into. Look at the colors. Tell me you don't want to drink this. The Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf just introduced their new Butterfly Pea Tropical Teas, available from June 3rd through August 18th. These are bright, these are fruity, these are summer. You can try the Dragon Fruit Lychee Butterfly Tea. It's a little more sweet and fruity. It's absolutely unbelievable. This tastes like summer. Imagine this going to the beach. Or you can try the Coconut Butterfly Tea, which is smoother and a little more subtle. Or bring a friend and try both. They mix tropical fruit flavors with botanicals, so it's really refreshing, but it has a little more going on than your typical iced tea. It's like a flavor blast city. Just get one of these and walk around the mall. That's your day. That's your Saturday. Personally, I like it a little sweeter. The Dragon Fruit Lychee Butterfly Tea is delicious. But again, I also love coconut, so coconut butterfly tea is amazing as well. So if you want to try something new and refreshing, a little different from your regular order, these are definitely worth trying. Just head to your nearest Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. And if you plan on trying one, let me know which one you're gonna try. Send me a picture. I'll respond. What's up, guys? Real quick. The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every goal changes everything. And now FanDuel is giving you a reason to root for every single one. Introducing Every Goal Pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. That's right, more goals means more bonus bets, and all you have to do is turn on your token. If you're looking to add some more fun while you're watching sports, from the opening whistle to the final kick, FanDuel has you covered. Check out my link down below if you want to get started today with FanDuel. This month for soccer is going to be insane, and I cannot wait. Were you aware of Justin Berfield from Unhappily Married?
No. All three of the young boys, Frankie and Eric, we saw on a tape the second day of casting. And we were just like, oh, well, that wasn't so hard.
We got it.
And Justin came in to audition about 3 days after that. And I mean, like, we had casting people in Vancouver and Toronto and Manitoba and New Orleans, you know, I mean, also New York and Chicago. And we had them in Atlanta, you know, and it was just like, well, we tell them to go home. Like,
because were you in LA and Frankie was in New Jersey at that point? So he sent in his casting tape.
He sent in a casting tape and it came in on the second day and it was just like sold.
As being creator of Malcolm, do you put together the family to make sure that they all look good for a screen test or anything?
Everybody does. I mean, that's sort of the one thing. The casting is where it's very difficult to, you know, the studio that's paying for it and the network that's going to, you know, has to air it. They are going to want to say in like who gets on the camera, you know, who's going to be in it. So it's a whole, if the casting, the gamut for actors is just heinous. You know, you go in and you read for a casting director, and if they think you're workable, they'll send you on to the producer. And if the casting director still thinks you're viable and then the producer thinks they're viable, then they go on and audition for the studio, and then everyone in the studio has to say like, yeah, I like that one. And then you go to the network with like 3 alternatives or 4 alternatives for each part, if you have them. And then, you know, you argue it out.
It's hoop after hoop after hoop after executive after hoop.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Being an actor sucks. You know, it's really, it's very difficult. And, you know, I was able to, on this project, we could shorten it up a little bit because, one, we had 90% of the cast was already cast. You know, they'd been cast decades ago. And so for the new characters, We really worked hard on it. And once we had decided who we want, we were able to, really lean our thumb on like, this is who we want. And because of the track record of the show, they were like, okay, yeah, go ahead.
They trusted you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Or they were willing to act like they trusted me.
Even back then, your guest stars was very impressive for who went on to do incredible things.
We had really good casting people. Mary Buck and Susan and Kent and all these people were just so good. And I mean, casting was one of those things that if you have any sensitivity at all, casting is gruesome. Because you see these people, they've worked all fucking week and maybe for 2 weeks on this like 1.5, 2-minute meeting. That's their entire week's been dedicated to. And you're coming out of, a rewrite or editing or coming up from the stage, and this is like one of 50 fucking things. So you're like this thing that means so much to you, putting it out there in front of people that are really fucking busy with other things, and you're one of 10 people with equally, with equal importance that they've assigned to this. So, we always tried to be very cognizant of that. But we also had such good people. Like, we always had an embarrassment of riches in our casting.
Like Emma Stone, Dakota Fanning.
Yeah. She was so fun. Dakota Fanning was so goddamn funny. She was like 6 and she didn't have any lines. All she did was bite people. And she was like so funny doing it.
Who was your favorite side character?
I really like the poker guys.
Just a group of them.
Yeah, kind of as a group. We didn't often have sympathetic adult guest stars. So it was nice to have a bunch of guys like, close to my age, as a group coming in. And because then it was like all the grown-ups. And, their energy is so great and they're all really funny in their own ways. And they really worked well together. They really understood the dynamics between them in a way that I always thought was hilarious. And I would look forward to that. Like when I saw on the production schedule, like we're doing the poker guys on Wednesday, I'd be sort of like, can't wait for Wednesday.
Even what you did with them in the revival was so fun.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I didn't feel like, the fans are going to demand this, but I really
such a sweet treat.
Demanded that, we got to do a really good song and dance number, do the gentleman callers, bring them back. We also had this choreographer from the old show, Fred Talixon, who did such brilliant stuff that, it was that great combination of seeming really professionally executed and gigantically stupid at the same time, which I loved. Seeing Candyman with all this intricate hat choreography sung by a bunch of, cadets, or, the roller skating where it was like, wow, he can really skate. This is so dumb. that juxtaposition we really leaned on a lot.
How is it for you figuring out where all these characters were 20 years later? Like the poker guys, what made you want to put them in the market and that was what they were going to do as opposed to something else?
I don't know. It just sort of seemed like they're still friends. By the time you've had friends for 20 years, those stick around. That's your group as an older adult until somebody dies. So that was kind of easy, because it was their part was just sort of about, they're Hal's friend group. And so whatever Hal's doing, they're doing with him.
Was there anyone who came back for the revival that you were having a little bit of an issue of where you wanted to see them 20 years after?
No, there were a few things that I knew I didn't want to do because, there's a lot of those sort of returning things. And there's this crutch of like, well, now it's the opposite thing, like the rich guy in the show, now he's destitute and he's, that's the thing you see him. And, I didn't want to do any of that because, my life isn't super different than it was 20 years ago. I know circumstances can change, but it just felt like those sort of obvious things I didn't want to do. And I felt like some of the stuff that we had laid out was, that Frankie Malcolm always thought that like his family was kind of his biggest obstacle to happiness in life. And it kind of reflected my own experience, like when I was 20 and I sort of realized just how heinous me and my family's social skills were. Like we were kind of a fringe family. Just because, everyone in my family didn't think much of being pleasant around other people. They sort of thought that was phony. I was a kid. I was like, this doesn't seem right. I don't know what it is, but I was carrying the same thing, the same sort of belligerence and belittling. And I realized like other people don't do that. And people that I admire and like, they don't do that, and they don't seem phony to me. So I went on sort of a very long project of seeing how other people had friends and had relationships and sort of copying that. And my life got better. My relationships got better. And, I had fewer like sort of bad luck things happening to me. And I felt like that was a good place to put Malcolm in, where he feels like, what? My life is good now because I don't see my family. I'm not around my family. And I knew that would give you something that I think is always really important in a story is the audience has to be wishing for something pretty quick. And you don't have to necessarily have that wish granted, but they have to be wishing something. They have to be wanting something to happen. And I feel like if Malcolm's saying like, my life is great because never see my family, you're going to want him to see his family.
And that's in the trailer opening.
Yeah. And that sort of felt like, okay, well, let's see how that happens and let's see when it happens and let's see if he's doing stuff to make it more likely to happen or is what he's doing making it less likely to happen. And so I knew that was going to be sort of a main thrust of it. Like with Hal, that was mirroring a lot of the stuff I have where, your kids grow up and they leave the nest and you don't have to spend every second of your life worrying about them and, helping them solve their problems and fixing stuff that they've destroyed or broken or people they've alienated or, you end up with this enormous amount of bandwidth that you didn't used to have. And, there's existential things that can pop in when you have that. And that seemed like, okay, well, he doesn't have the kids anymore. And everything was sort of defined through his relationship with the kids. So if he's left with that, what's left?
Alex Reed writer of Malcolm, mentioned that Dewey was possibly going to be an astronaut at some point, or possibly that way he was.
We were trying to come up, Eric Sullivan, God bless him, he doesn't want to be an actor anymore. And we pestered him. I pestered him. We're still friends. We've been friends the whole time. And when we were first talking about it and I had a general idea for the story, I called, we checked and made sure all the actors wanted to come back. And I called Eric, said, listen, I know you don't want to do it, but I can find something really tiny, like something that'll, maybe 2-3 days that you can just do it. And then, everyone would be so thrilled to have you. He's like, I don't want to be an actor again. And we kept thinking like, okay, well, what can he do in one day of shooting that we can piece out over 4 episodes? That's like 4 pages, something that's 4 pages, but that you can shoot in, a day. And then we were going, well, he could be an astronaut. It's like, that doesn't make any fucking sense that he's an astronaut. And then why is he calling the family, every 20 minutes? And we finally just decided he was calling in Zoom, and it was pretty contrived, but it was really set up so that, I could honestly tell Eric, this will take half a day. We can shoot it at your house. We can come into your house at like 10 o'clock in the morning and we'll leave at 2, and you can have cue cards and like, it couldn't be any easier. And he was like, dude, do you want to be an actor again? And I was like, no. He said, so leave me alone about it. I'm like, let's talk about something else. It's like, okay. So then we had it, and I thought, like, you know what? It's hard to service all these characters, and so we'll recast it. And if he's on a computer monitor, you know, I think that gives you some, like, he doesn't have to look exactly, you know, like Dewey. And then we didn't realize we were going to find someone like Caleb who looks exactly like Eric. He looks more like Eric, you know, grown up than Eric does. You know, Eric now looks exactly like his dad, which is not the same as, you know, little kid Eric. And Caleb just looks exactly like Frankie Muniz said, like, if you hadn't have told me that was not Eric, I would have thought it was Eric. Like, totally would have bought it.
I saw an old interview of him even as a kid, and he's like, I don't know if I want to be an actor forever. Maybe I want to do something kind of like Linwood, be behind the camera.
He didn't want to be in show business anymore. And he really, you know, he was done with acting. And then, like, other kids made it really hard on him, you know, with, like, just sort of not accepting that he wasn't on TV anymore. And it really, it made it difficult for him when he was, you know, like 12 and 13 and 14. And then when he finally sort of got past that, he was like, I don't want to go back to that. You know, that was like some of the most trying, difficult times in my life. And you know what? I'm really happy to be away from that.
Right. What was it like being the showrunner for Malcolm in the Middle compared to other sitcoms like an Everybody Loves Raymond or Friends or other, not even Friends, more of an Everybody Loves Raymond that's a family show?
Well, I mean, I'd done other show. I did show running on Night Court, and I'd done a bunch of pilots with different people, and I did Third Rock from the Sun, and did this show called Townies, which I really loved. And, you know, showrunning's different depending on the personality of the showrunner. You know, I'm very detail oriented. And so I really I need to plan a lot. You know, I think my personality is just such that, you know, I sort of really plan, you know, when I get up in the morning and I'm having my coffee, I spend a big part of that initial time, like, going through the calendar for the next 4 days, even though I went through it right before I went to bed, of what's happening and what I need to make sure I do and what I need to prepare for. You know, it's just my personality. And so the shows I worked on have always reflected that. They've always been very planned and very detailed. There's very little on the part of the actors or the writers improvisation. You know, there's no you know what? Let's go home. We'll figure out that joke tomorrow morning. You know,
it's always figured out.
It's like this is the time to figure it out, and then if it doesn't work, we have to have a backup plan. You know, that sort of thing. And with the actors, I know it was kind of limiting because we would work on something and rework it and rephrase it, and there's a sort of musical aspect to jokes that you know, something is funnier with 6 syllables than 8 syllables. And so getting the words approximately right doesn't work. You know, it changes the timing of it. And so we were pretty insistent, you know, and I was all through it because I was usually I was only working in comedy, and usually comedy where there were like real serious, heavy jokes in them. You know, it's like, take my wife if you really would like to. You know, it doesn't work. You know, it's Earl Pomerantz did a thing with why do I have to say it in exactly this? It's not. No one cares about the rhythm of it. And he went da 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 da, and it was like, that doesn't sound right, does it? And he said, no, it doesn't. Okay, that's why. Because we're exactly like Beethoven. But the point remains. So my shows have always been very planned and thought out. And I found a line producer who was very much the same way, Jimmy Simons, who was very much like, let's plan this out. Let's not go $200,000 over budget because we didn't think of something.
Oh.
You know, and it's kind of things like you get a script a month beforehand and you go like, these 2 scenes are going to cost us, you know, we can do it, but the show before has to be cheaper. You know, if you do, can you pick, you know, one, if you take out these 2 scenes from episode 9 or these 2 big scenes in episode 10, you know, or change where they're located, you know, and just sort of figure that out. And some things would be like, that's easy to change it. You know, it doesn't have to be set at night outside. It can be, at night inside, indoors, and on one of our existing sets, that's easy to do. And some of them are like, no, it's really important that this happens out on the street because, a big part of the joke is that the neighbors are seeing what's happening, that kind of thing.
To find the balance of where it
really... where you can, and, what all that requires is time to plan. And if a joke or an idea or a story idea won't satisfy the millions of conditions that it needs to in a network television production, you have time to come up with something else that will fit, the needs.
What would be the biggest budget episode for Malcolm in the Middle? Is it when the entire episode is filmed on location in Vegas, or?
That's part of it, but it's also how many guest stars you have. It's also how ambitious visually the show is and whether,
a drone shot or a crane.
Well, and also just something where you've got 10 people moving and you have to cover all of them. And so you can't do it in one shot and you need to have 10 camera setups, in which, every camera setup takes 25 minutes.
Are you figuring all that out when you're writing the script?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I'm not figuring it. You do it for a long time and you get an inherent sense of
rough,
that. But very soon when you deliver a script, you start breaking it down like, okay, well, this obviously he's going to need coverage on this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, and that person. He's going to need 2 sizes on it because one time he's moving around, the other time he's sitting in the chair. So it's going to be at least 2 sizes on the coverage in each one of those shots. The change time for changing the lighting and getting it all set up is a minimum of 20 minutes. So then you figure, okay, well, for this 10 seconds of TV time, you're committing to a total of a half a day of shooting.
When you come back for the revival and you see that script, does all that come back to you immediately? The cost,
the budget? I didn't see the script. I mean, I wrote the script, so not again in a larger sense, in a more. I'm trying to think if Jimmy had anything for me. I don't think he did. The budget was not quite as set in stone, because we weren't doing 28 and we had to fit a pattern. And 2, the initial budget was, I won't say it was generous, but it worked for what we had written. And, I wasn't interested in, I guess I could have, but I didn't have anything set in an airplane. I didn't have anything, where people were skydiving with fireworks, and I also always think when I am writing, I always think about how we're going to do it, because that was the thing that a lot of writers get tripped up on, especially in comedies, is they'll write something and even emotionally with actors, there's sort of no clear idea of how to accomplish that with human beings on a stage in front of a camera. And I always sort of I have a mindset of okay, well, I think it was the reason I have that mindset is I spent a lot of time coming up as a writer and seeing stuff that I thought was ruined and that I wasn't high enough up on the food chain to say you can't do it like that. You have to, it's not funny because that person isn't angry enough to justify what he's doing. It just looks like he's an asshole, not that he's been driven to this. And that's what's funny about it. And you can't do it in just a long shot because you have to see him getting upset. You have to have a close-up before you see what he does so you know why he's doing it. And that's why, so you know why it's funny. Those kind of things so when I write, I was always like, how's this going to work?
You just knew what would read on camera.
Well, I knew what had to read on camera. And then I would figure out well, what does that mean? Does that mean a close-up? Does that mean I need to make this line a little more explicit? We talk a lot in script writing about things landing, and it's that balance where, you want to let the audience add 2 and 2. You don't want to do it for them because it just sort of it makes them relax too much. And they just sort of, that's what kid shows do because kids, little kids can't do that. And they don't have enough cultural knowledge to sort of put things together from context. But adults do. And, it's you have that thing of a callback, those callback jokes where the longer you can make the callback, the funnier it seems to be. But if you do it too long and you also want the callback to not seem like you're planting something for a callback. But if you don't plan it hard enough, when you do the callback, no one remembers it, so there's no joke there. So that stuff is, I think a lot of writers think about that. And there's a lot of discussion about that in the room. But I'm very much like, as I'm writing it, thinking, is this going to work when we're doing it?
That I rewatched Malcolm from beginning to end, and that it's still, you can't turn away because there's a joke like every moment that happens. And like you said, those callbacks come back, which make things even better. So that was all intentional while you were writing, even back then. Because I feel like a lot of shows during that time were not doing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a one-camera show, which, it's a different beast. It's a very different kind of beast from a multicam show.
And no one was doing it at that time for sitcoms.
They hadn't been, for quite a while.
Was it hard to get the networks on board for that?
The way it was written, it was obviously like it had to be a one-camera thing because there was so much visual humor in it. And it was really more of a thing of you can do it or not. I mean, it's not like you can. I think one person pitched changing it to a multicam, and it was like, you can't.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Like, how do you do the shot? We ever said, well, you don't need that joke. And I sort of walk through, how do you do the shot where, his favorite thing, which was, the Francis making the same excuse through 6 different things of being in trouble. It's like, how do you do that in a multicam? And it's like, yeah, okay. And he still wanted to do it. But, that was, most people knew, like, it had to be a single camera show. And they just sort of took a flyer on it. This guy, Doug Herzog, was running the network, and, he knew they didn't really do that, but he thought, like, what the hell, let's try it.
Who came up with the idea for the transition scenes to be the whip pan?
I think that was Todd Holland. We talked a lot about how to put energy into the show, because the one thing that I noticed on, some of the other single camera comedies that didn't have laugh tracks. I mean, the laugh tracks are so fucking annoying, but they provide like an energy. I still can't remember the name. There was a thing that Larry Gelbart did, I think in the late 80s, that was a Jeff Bridges show, and it was a single camera comedy, with decent jokes and everything. I mean, Larry Gelbart's like really funny, and it just seemed dead. There was just something about like, no audience reaction or laughter. It just felt like lifeless.
And then was it those slow crossfades?
No, it was just the people talking like that without, there wasn't a lot of music. There wasn't, it was just sort of people talking. And there's, for whatever reason, I think a lot of it is audience conditioning, and like, I'm in the audience, I get conditioned, that you were expecting just more vitality to it. And so we knew we wanted to make sure that without that energy you get from an audience laughing, that we had other things. So we did a lot of like sound effects. We did a lot of very, very strong music cues, like up to the point where we were trying to figure out like, okay, is this too much? Are we like pulling people out of it or making this seem like a Saturday morning show? And part of it was the idea that like, we're seeing this show through a, 10, 12-year-old's eyes. So, that kind of stuff is appropriate. But if you go too much on it, then you're saying this isn't for grownups. And the swish pans, I think Todd just tried it. He said he put one in on his cut, and he was like, I think those are good. I think that's right. And we thought like, you know what? Yeah, it's just energetic enough without, like a bicycle horn on top of it would have been like, okay, now we're Saturday morning and we're,
Right. What's the idea behind when Reese is driving through driving school and the police are chasing him and you guys pull in a song like In Too Deep from Sum 41
right.
to make it really current and in that moment?
The reason for that was our music supervisor, Julie Houlihan, who was a true genius. They would pull from current stuff, but they would just sort of pull stuff that like, this vibe is like kind of like a party, and it's kind of like trying, and the vibe of the music feels that. And she was always great at finding stuff that fit the mood. Sometimes even the lyrics were sort of going against it, but the vibe of it was exactly right. And, that was like everything else. She really made the pilot work. She really, I think, was a big part of that thing selling.
Speaking of the pilot, 22 million people tune into that very first episode.
Yeah.
What's your reaction? Do you think that this thing is going to be successful? Do you think that the network's going to give you a go?
Well, we had shot, before it aired, we had shot everything. Like they had shot 12 episodes. So we knew they were going to air all of them because they'd paid for it already, and they wouldn't save a penny by not airing it. It would be a write-off. And it was, the pilot was delivered about 7 or 8 months before it aired. It was planned as a mid-season show. And we gotten a lot of critical good press.
Just off that pilot?
Off the pilot. Again, it's very different, and critics love something that isn't like the other 10 hours a day, 7 days a week that they've been sitting through, like anything that gives them like, oh, look at that. That's different. So we had, very, very strong, almost unanimous critical acclaim. And that sort of convinced them that, what, let's give it a shot behind The Simpsons. And The Simpsons, 24 million, and we managed to hold on to 22 million of it, which was a big marker of success. But we knew, what was really important was what happened the next week and the week after, and we held our spot. We didn't precipitously drop off. So it was never like, oh my God, I can't believe this. It felt like, again, I'd done a lot of research and planning and just sort of said, oh, I hope that, if everything goes right, this could be good. We could get another season out of it,
Did you ever toy with the idea of giving the characters more of a through line, like Malcolm doing a certain class and like something that goes sequentially throughout?
That was sort of a no-no in network television.
Because you wanted anyone to tune in anytime to watch anything and just get it.
I mean, that was a mandate, and we were like, okay, that's fine. There's the situation, and it's a family that are sort of, working class family with a lot of really weird personalities, and that's sort of what you have to come back to. And, it's kabuki theater on some level, but, we grow up in that and you work on that for years. That's fine. We talked a lot each season because we did not want to pretend when Frankie was 16 that he was still 10.
When you talked a lot each season, what do you mean?
At the beginning, me and the writers would go through what's this season? Is there something that needs to change because the kids are old, when their voices
now he's into
all
girls
changed.
more or something.
Yeah. When their voices changed, it all sort of happened at the same time. And we were like, there's stuff that one of the big things was, okay, now what is it going to not be funny and transgressive anymore because they're older and now it's just fucking common thuggery.
It's not as cute.
It's not cute at all. Like a little kid punching a grown-up man in the balls is funny, but
what
sort
age
of big,
is that?
strong 18-year-old punching a grown man in the balls is sort of less charming. So we would talk about that, and we'd also talk about, like the military school thing was like, he's looking really long in the tooth to still be in high school. I think we can buy him as 17 or 18, 17 and a half or 18, but we can't buy him as 16. So we talked about those kind of things and moved him out of the military school. And my brother had gone to work in a logging camp in Canada, and I thought that idea was kind of fun. And I had this worked at a summer camp with this really despicable tyrant woman who was just like so strong and capable, but so fucking mean, and sadistic. And I thought like, okay, well, let's see what happens when we give him that, because Francis always worked well with a really strong authority figure to fight against, that always sort of, we could always figure out like Francis is presented with some authoritarian thing. And, it was like, okay, we know what to do. And then that was too grim. Nobody liked it. And so we said, okay, well, let's get him somewhere nicer. And that, so each year, and we would sort of figure out for Hal and Lois, we felt like, at one point we were like, okay, are we going to do a baby? Because Jane was pregnant. And then, so we wrote a pregnancy in, and then we had to write the pregnancy. The timing of it was always off, where she was pregnant and we had to hide it with, laundry baskets and shit like that. And then we'd write it in pregnant and she wasn't pregnant anymore. And she was trying to get pregnant and, but it never matched up. So we would have these conversations at the beginning of the year and just sort of say, are there things we can safely adjust with their situation with, just to prevent, certain problems we would see coming up with aging. And does that still work? And are there stories that it gives us? Does it give us new story ideas that still fit in the bucket of, things that we can do? But that was it. There wasn't anything of like trying to write like it's the reason two-parters were very rare, because it's sort of like if you didn't see
the first part,
then you don't even know why everyone's all worked up about something.
What was your favorite episode that you guys filmed?
The most fun to film was opera, because it was very ambitious, and Jimmy said, you're going to need an extra day of filming. You're going to need 7 days to shoot, not 6. And I was just like, really? So that was awesome. It was just fun because there are a lot of fresh technical demands that, we sort of put on ourselves. It was fun to see the actors doing that stuff and have Charlie write this really cool music for it. And that was my favorite one to film. I still think the pilot is one of the best, most enjoyable episodes, because when you haven't seen those characters before and you're discovering them, I think the discovery of them and how they act was really refreshing and fun. I really liked Red Dress a lot because I felt like that cemented, and I didn't write it. Al Higgins wrote it, and, it really had that same style. It was one of our most popular episodes, and that it was one of my favorites because I felt like, okay, other people get it. Other people can do this. If I get hit by a meteorite tomorrow,
the show goes on.
The show goes on. I really liked Pearl Harbor, just because the boys dancing to ABBA together, I still think about it and laugh. I think I have a lot of favorite moments more than, I like that episode so much more than these other episodes.
The filming itself of certain scenarios.
Yeah, the filming of it, and just also seeing it when it gets, put back together.
What's your relationship with the bowling episode of Malcolm? Because that ends up winning an Emmy.
Yeah. It was great. It was a really good idea. We just started thinking about like, how can we make this thing like, is there some way we can write this that's like actually clever? Right now we had this big hit season. We can do whatever the fuck we want, and like, so I think for a lot of people that we can do whatever we want is like, all right, let's go home early. No one cares. And we all felt like, well, let's, be as ambitious as we can. And I think Alex Reed was saying like, I really like the idea of sliding doors, but I don't think they did it enough. It was just sort of like 2 stories, but it wasn't like based on personality stuff. It was more just sort of chance and like how this thing follows that thing follows this thing and then this thing follows, but we like the idea of like, it's sliding doors, but it's like mom and dad and their personalities and how their personalities interact with each other. And we were all really excited about pitching it out. We do a lot of very detailed pitching in the room of like what this, how the story is going to break, what exactly happens and then what happens after that and what happens after that. And it was really fun to work on. It was still new enough in the show that you could, things that you were still thinking of things that hadn't been done in other episodes easily. By season 6 or 7, it's like, oh, they could do blah, blah, blah. It's like, we did that in season 2. Oh, did we? Yeah, except you did it with Reese and Lois, not Francis and Lois. Oh, right. Okay.
Where'd you guys film that episode? Was that here in the
Bowling?
Valley?
Yeah, at Corbin Bowl.
Oh, so you guys just rented out and
Yeah, that was one of those things. Like, okay, look, we're going to spend 2 days in bowling alley. Like, you got to make something a little easier to shoot.
At the very end, Frankie walks all the way down to the lane, throws the ball and misses.
It's such a good joke.
How many takes is that?
He did it. No, he did it the first take.
Wow.
The missing.
And it didn't hit any pins.
Didn't hit any pins. And like we had glued the pins down. And it was one of those things like, well, if it hits, if it just glances against it and it
was perfect.
I mean, Frankie's pretty athletic. And so, he really, and again, that was the thing, like why that kid was so remarkable was he was so genuinely angry and you saw him fucking throw it and it really looks like he's throwing it the right way. And then it just sort of, it was almost like it was magic the way, because he didn't like throw it or, he was just
It was intentionally going for a strike.
Physically so good. And yeah, I mean, that's, that what's great about that is it's so unexpected. And then it was set up so you knew how gigantically humiliating that was going to be.
That walk back down.
The surprise of it was also that like we went there and just let, the hero of the show be so deeply, astonishingly humiliated without any recourse, because that was something that, you didn't really do in TV. They still, shy away from, like really
the hero looking
attacking
bad.
The hero. Yeah.
Was there a moment where you realized Frankie skyrocketed into another stratosphere as far as fame in Hollywood?
It was pretty quick. I mean, it was like
that first season?
Yeah. I mean, he was really just, when they were writing about the show, I mean, because he was the star of it, they were writing about him and writing about Jane. But they were mostly writing about Jane because people sort of knew, like, okay, Jane's fantastic, but, a little kid who was this good was really weird and really unusual.
Did you ever look at other networks like Nickelodeon or?
Well, Nickelodeon wasn't really a thing until after Malcolm was on.
Oh,
it was a big deal sort of when Malcolm was ending.
That's when it became like those kid shows. Did Malcolm almost set way for kids TV, but more directed towards kids?
I don't think so.
Different.
Yeah, I mean, they're different animal. I mean, kid shows are a very different thing, and the people who are good at it understand what's different about it. There used to be a pipeline between bad TV writers going to kid shows and just writing bad kid shows. But then the people, Dan Schneider, who really, did iCarly stuff, he understood what was
kids TV.
Yeah, what kids TV was. And, it was not just bad adult TV. It was a different thing. The rules for like when you can be transgressive and when you need to not be transgressive are very arcane. They're sort of like you really have to have a deep understanding of it.
On Malcolm, Lois was not the warm, motherly figure that a lot of people were used to.
Yeah.
Were they ever trying to get you to have her be that?
Oh, when we did the pilot, not the people that we had to listen to. There's a thing called focus group testing. And especially back, at the turn of the century, it was the most toxic, ridiculous thing that people did. It was a testing company that basically was set up as a way for the networks because, nobody knows anything. No one knows what's going to be a hit, but these people at the networks, their job is to
try and buffer it.
Produce a hit. And it's like, I can produce you a hit, and that's why you should pay me a salary. And I can make other people, I can change their stuff so it becomes a hit. But no one knows. But, so as a way to sort of justify buying something, because their boss, they authorize a pilot to be shot, and the boss says, this thing sucks. Why the fuck did you spend, $2 million making this? It tested brilliantly. It tested great. Everyone
they can
that
cover
we
themselves.
tested. Yeah. And, it's sort of like, it sounds on the first blush like it might work. Like, okay, well, this hit TV show and this other hit TV show both have heroic characters. So every show has to have a heroic character. If you have a heroic character, it'll be like these two shows. And, that hit show has a doctor in it, and that hit show has a cop in it. So, you should have a doctor and a cop in this show, and that'll make, it's those kind of things, and it rewards, sort of copying successful shows that are on the air. Thankfully, Fox they didn't care about testing because testing was not great. Frankie, by the end of it, tested good, but I think a lot of that was people had seen him by a half hour, and after a half hour had gone by, they understood what it was and were like, okay, we like this. And the other thing with testing is they had these focus groups afterwards and never failed. You'd see people while they were watching it, you watch the thing roaring with laughter and slapping each other and going like, oh my God. And then when they would start asking, how was it? What did you think? And they go like, it was great. So, okay. Glad you liked it. What was your favorite thing about it? I liked the kids. Okay, now if there was any way we could make it even better, how would we do that? And they sort of shrug and they go like, there must be something. And then, it starts, well, I guess I didn't like when, the guy, when he was talking in front of a flaming car. I mean, someone could get hurt in that.
Right.
And then it just turns this dog pile. And then, in an effort to eliminate any possible source of discontent, they say, well, you can't do that. And things like, the mom being a little crazy. It was like, you have to get rid of that. She has to say much more often that she loves him and, do things that, support him when he's feeling bad. And thankfully Fox was like, no, that's funny. We don't care much about testing, but, NBC and CBS and ABC really cared about testing. So.
How was it for you filming the block party day? When Malcolm's family comes back.
And no, they have a block party every year and they don't do this?
Past 5 years.
I'll tell you what was fun about it was Lois doing the hot dog eating contest, which Jane was like, this is great. I love these hot, and we're just like, you're going to make yourself sick. Like, she was like, yeah, no, I'm not. I'm going to, she was in character. She was like, I'm a Polish kid from Minnesota. This is,
this is my dream.
This is my dream. Yeah.
At what point did you realize Bryan was down to do anything that was good for the show? When he's covered in bees, he covers himself in blue paint.
That was the bees was after about episode, I think 7 or 8. And we were just like, he's willing to do anything. And we spent some time. What wouldn't he do? Let's see. What are things he wouldn't do? And we were like, oh, he probably wouldn't, skydive. So we can't afford to show him skydiving, in a way that wouldn't look fake.
Yeah.
And Al Higgins, what if we cover him in a beard of bees? We're like, what is that? He got an encyclopedia thing of, beard bee man, from a circus sideshow. And we're like, what the fuck? Kid's going to say no to that. I said, let's ask him. And he went, no, I'll do that. That sounds fun. But the genesis of that was, I mean, the story is so contrived where he's designed a laser guided bee cannon. It's like we had started from let's get them covered with bees and then figure out how to do it.
How does this make sense?
Yeah. It barely did, but we loved the idea so much. And him being willing to do that, we thought like, okay, you know what? People will forgive that just for the spectacle of it.
What'd you think when Bryan went on to do Breaking Bad?
I'll tell you what, I'm going to say, honestly, it bothered me was people kept calling me up and saying, were you shocked to see that Bryan could, do something like that? And I was like, fuck you. No. Anyone who's ever worked with Bryan would not be the slightest bit surprised that he's awesome.
He's that dynamic.
In that, that he's a really amazing actor. He's kind of a generational find as an actor, someone who can be that powerful and that committed and so like really deeply funny while still being really honest and handling all the demand. When he started doing LBJ, when he got the job for LBJ, he was asking me, there's this other movie thing and this, it's not same. I mean, I don't need the money, but it's a lot more money to do the movie. And I said, you're going to spend, for LBJ, you're going to spend 6 months in a basement doing research and putting on, whatever it is, 4 hours of makeup every night. You're going to love that. That's going to be like your dream. And, because he's like that. He just, these challenging things, because he's got such a giant toolkit that I think he likes using everything in it.
Did you see, I don't want to say like a boom, but what were the effects that you saw when Frankie would go do Agent Cody Banks or do other movies that were really big hits amongst kids?
The thing we felt was, this is really fucking up our shooting schedule.
Because he would leave in the middle of filming?
Yeah, you have to do a filming thing, and it was just like, what the fuck? We need you Thursday.
Do you have a favorite relationship dynamic amongst any of the family? Would it be Francis and Lois?
Francis and Lois is the one I understood the most. And Francis and Hal, I understood a lot. I always felt like the brothers' interactions with each other, even though their personalities were so different, the relationships were always the same. Again, that was sort of my background with my brothers. They were sort of like, I didn't have a separate relationship with my brother Bryan and my brother, it was always like our relationship. We were the boys. So I don't know that we ever really plumbed something. I mean, Malcolm and Reese being close to the same age and sort of vying with each other a lot was, a really strong dynamic, but I can't say it was completely different than Malcolm's relationship with Dewey or Reese's relationship with Dewey. It just meant that they were all sort of like basically, felt like they were part of a family, but they were always going to try and, if somebody could push the other one down to get up, or just, team up to do something that they shouldn't be doing, that was always equal on all three parts.
Was there anything that you didn't know if it would be too far for the audience to handle?
No, I felt like if I was going to be the most transgressive, and I kind of felt like, we can apologize if, I think that a lot of people felt like the stuff at the ranch and the sort of unrelenting grimness of that was too far.
In what way? With the animals?
In Alaska, though, that the whole vibe of it was just such a downer. And that it was just sort of like, I think people were waiting for it to like be over so they could get to the sort of lighter stuff in the episode, as opposed to looking forward to it. And there were great, like we had a slow motion fight scene, like a fist fight between Francis and Lavernia. Like it's just this fun with a 20-year-old guy and a 50-year-old woman, bare knuckle boxing. And, that was awesome and really funny, but it's in this context that I think, was a little too grim, and I was like very happy with it. And I was like, yeah, okay, well, that's probably a little too far.
Were you a fan of all the themes of the show in the way of like a Mortal Kombat, wrestling, like skateboarding? Was that your culture growing up?
It was all stuff I liked watching, and I liked seeing. Like, I wasn't a wrestler, but I really loved watching wrestling. And I thought, the skateboarding stuff, that had just started. I mean, when I was a kid, the skateboards were these gigantic wood things. They were about this long and they were this thick, and they were just sort of like, they were called Hobies. Some guy, Hobie Alter, I think, was like the guy who invented surfing or something. But that was the only surfer anyone had heard of. But after a while, there was nobody was doing crazy tricks on them. You were just pushing yourself around on them, and then you get tired and get on your bike instead. But it was all stuff I liked, that kind of like kid culture and like hammering through channels. Like I love anime, I still do.
What's your favorite anime?
I really like Naruto. I like where it went. I like Eric Kaplan, who's writer on the show. I was watching Avatar, which just fucking brilliant, and I was talking to him about it, and he was very sniffy. He says, that's not, that's fine, but you need to watch Naruto. And I was like, all right. And I did, and I got hooked right away.
Oh, wow.
Well, it has that thing. It's a Japanese thing that they have a lot, but I hadn't seen it before. So it was where your hero is a complete idiot, and he's a hero anyway. Like if you're dumb, what else can you have that makes you admirable? And they figured out all this other stuff, but always kept him stupid, which I loved.
Do you watch any dramas now?
Dramas, not as much. Sometimes I'll watch a spy thing, but they're usually pretty like Slow Horses, you could call just a comedy.
Right.
I'm just getting a little old and sensitive to be watching much dramas. I can't watch horror stuff. I watched Cabin in the Woods, which was fine. I was okay with that. But anything, more dread-inducing is just sort of like, I don't want to watch this. I have to go to bed soon.
What other than anime, what writing really impressed you from the showrunner's perspective?
Oh, lots of. I really like the writing in The Bear. I don't feel like it's not a comedy, but it's really good writing. It's really strong, insightful writing. And I think a lot of you can tell it's good writing because it lets the actor, all kinds of different actors are just compelling doing it, and you really feel like they're bringing their authentic selves into it, in a way that's sort of different than other places you've seen them. I like a lot of comedies, I really like, I have a hard time watching Curb, but I think the sort of the ideas behind each episode are so great and so like unique, you don't see those things everywhere else. I really like things that are kind of idiosyncratic, it's sort of like meeting a new person that you haven't met before.
When Malcolm was on, would you watch other things that were on at that time?
I didn't watch anything. I didn't read
24/7
anything.
Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, there's too much to do. And we would finish the season and everyone would end up in the emergency room at the end of the season.
How much downtime is there between the end of a season and the new one?
Well, at its best, you have a month off.
Really?
Well, then because you have to start writing. And it was sort of like the season would end. You would finish shooting in like February, and then you'd be editing until like March, end of March. And then you'd have April and part of May off. And then June, you had to be back writing so that you could start filming again in, August. It was, a month off is nice. And the editing, the last 2 months where you're just editing is pretty nice.
Are you in the room for that?
Yeah.
Whole time?
Everything. The detail-oriented thing. I had a really good editor, Steve Welsh, a genius. And he's one of those guys that, like, you kind of have to book him 2 years in advance because no one ever wants to let him leave. once they have him, they realize like this is saving me days and days and days because he's so good and so fast. We had 2 editors on the show to begin with, which was a normal thing because it's a very time-consuming job. And so you have editors alternating. So they sort of have 2 weeks to work before I come in. And then the next one has 2 weeks before they come in on the way, and they can just, and it was faster to have Steve do both than to have 2 editors. Like I ended up spending less hours in the editing room because we were very aligned and he's really fast. I mean, the kind of button pushing you see on that stuff where I'd say like, maybe I can see it where he says that, like half a frame faster, but I know there's a sound stuff that has to be done too. And that lighting changes for crossing and he'd be done by the time I finish the sentence. So like this, and I go like, yeah, like that. Okay. Thank you. Moving on.
There was one episode where the network sped it up a little so that they could sneak in another commercial.
Oh, yeah.
Did that make you mad?
Fuck, it made me furious. I was like, that's, I don't know. There was something about it that just felt so
slimy,
uncool. Yeah, it was just like you were just doing that to see if you could get away with it. That's like so intense. It wasn't even like, they forced us to do it. It was just like, let's see if they notice. It's like, fuck you, see if they notice.
What episode was it?
I can't even remember now.
First season?
I think it was second season.
Okay.
I think it was second season. And I mean, I remember the people I was yelling at and and they just were so like, well, okay. Well, you caught us. We didn't know if anyone would notice. And it's like,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
How does it work for a show creator where you came up with Malcolm in the Middle? Do you own the rights to that to where that's when you sell it to the network?
When they buy the script, they're buying the rights to it.
Forever.
Oh.
Do you own any of it?
If they don't do anything with it? Yeah. I mean, when you make those deals, there are, Writers Guild union minimums, just the unions over the years have said, okay, well, this is a way they screw people. So we'll nail that one down. And then they'll invent a new way to screw somebody and they'll nail that one down. I mean, that's what strikes are. So there's, certain minimums and royalties you get. And as you gain more experience and become more, sort of valuable
in the industry,
more in demand in the industry, those protections go up from there. So, I've been doing TV for like 30 years before I made the Malcolm deal. And so I had already, gone through quite a few bumps. And so my deal with Malcolm was completely fine. And, when it hit really big, I was like, we don't have to renegotiate anything. It's already, that stuff's in my deal already. So.
Oh.
But those are, it's a little bit like I have some protection because people feel like they can't do it without me. So, I have some, like if I don't think something should happen and, I have enough money that like, I don't need the job. I don't need to keep the job, that it really will go away if I'm not doing it. So that helps with, the sort of control over the property, but I can't control where they sell it to. I mean, if they wanted to sell it to the Hitler Network, I mean, I couldn't legally prevent them.
Do you think...
By the way, that's not a good idea.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Do you think people have that feeling because of how hands-on you are with the project?
Yeah, I think so.
It really is your baby.
Yes, for better and worse. It's weird. I feel, and this is really true, that so much of what's good about that show is because of the work of other people, and everything that's wrong of it is my fault.
That's you being a generous creator, though.
No, I think it's just the facts of it is because everything had to run through me, and someone would have a great idea, and then I'd be in like, that's a great idea. And someone would also have a great idea that I didn't like. And so that didn't get to go in. And there was some idea that I did like that went in instead that, people, turned out not to be a good idea. And that was my fault, like.
Who's your favorite character?
I think Malcolm. honestly. I mean, it's hard to separate the character from the actor and your experience with, what it's like to work, what the work is like. And sometimes, it's like everyone has certain things. I mean, Cloris Leachman was such a titanic pain in the ass.
Oh, really?
She was literally crazy. Like she
wouldn't read her lines?
Yes, she would. I mean, here's the thing. She so brilliantly talented that, you just put up with it. And you just go like, God damn it, Cloris. I told her, on the last episode, I said, Cloris, it has been the honor of my life to fight with you and tell you to stop doing this and to just please shut up and do this the way it's written. Like, that has been the honor of my life. Because you'd see her and it was just so undeniable, how funny it was and how like compelling it was. Everything she did, and then she'd show up on the set and I need to bring a canned ham into this scene. It's like, no, you can't. Well, then I'm bringing in something else. And it was just, like she very difficult, but the character was great. And, you'd end up with this stuff that was just thrilling. I don't know any other way to put it, when you'd see her do stuff. So how do you separate that, but Malcolm was my sort of therapy version of me, where I could really examine parts of myself that I had either purposefully ignored for years or hadn't occurred, ways of looking at things that another way of looking at it hadn't occurred to me. And I would have these sort of surprising revelations about like, I thought it was this, and that was me being dumb and closed off because it was actually this. That guy that I thought was just bullying, he was trying to help me and I was too stupid to see it. He was actually nice. Those kind of things, which I think are really, when I have a discovery like that, it always feels like, oh, you know what? That's my world has expanded a little bit. Like I'm happier than I was 30 seconds before I realized that. Even when it's like realizing something I was dumb about. So I think Malcolm is really like, for that reason, like it was always rewarding to engage with that character.
Were the other boys based on your brothers?
Only in the most tangential way. More situationally, like I did have my oldest brother, Jerry, was kicked out when he was 15. I was like 9, 10. And my brother Bryan, was the same age as Reese, but he was not like a stupid thug. I mean, none of us were that bright. And we were all pretty physical with each other, but, he wasn't like a school bully or anything. And he was actually kind of artistic.
Huh.
And Greg was, he was the youngest. So, like in a family like that, you don't pay any attention to him. You don't even know. I didn't know what his personality was like until he was an adult.
Where did the word Krellboyne come from?
I just threw it in there. I have a very strong general rule for myself that spending any time on a name is annoying. Like I've been in shows and jobs where someone was going, should it be Betty or Becky? Becky. Hey, Becky, how you doing? Hey, Betty, how you doing? And, it's just like, just pick one. Fuck.
Right. Didn't really matter.
There's actual work that needs to go on here instead of that. So, like Hal and Lois I had used as adult female and adult male characters in like 30 scripts. And like if they never came to anything, if they were only like day players or something on a script, if they were like ended up being a series regular or something, then I'd find new names, but I didn't really put any thought. I remember with like Malcolm as a name, I just thought, what's sort of silly sounding, especially for a kid. Like a name that other kids would make fun of, like Linwood, like Malcolm. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
And then you came up with the show name after that? Malcolm
Yeah.
in the Middle?
Yeah. But the Krellboyne thing was like, I remember I wanted something that sounded like nerds, but I also liked the idea of inventing, that world's own term for it. And there was a movie called Little Shop of Horrors, the original, and there was the character, and it was Seymour Krellboyne. And so I was like, okay, Krellboyne, that sounds like something you would call, a smart kid, to be insulting.
Is Reese his full name? Reese?
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, I think it's short for Reese Aqualan.
Wow,
No,
this is groundbreaking.
It's
I can't believe that. Reese
Aqualan. What would long for Reese be?
What was your reaction to when the whole cast comes together after 20 years? Did it go how you thought it would be? Because you grew up, you saw all these kids grow up together, and now they have kids of their own.
Well, although, there was a long pause with, I would see Frankie, every couple of years, and, we'd talk or text or email or something, and Justin, I saw a little bit after, but again, it was like Zoom or email, but like seeing them and like seeing them with their kids with them, is just like, wow, this is, and it's a long time ago. So that was, when you get to be my age, it's always startling because everything you think was 3 or 4 years ago was actually 15 years ago, and you've just sort of compressed it. But the vibe of it was very quick to realize that everyone was slipping back in. And someone said, this is like summer camp where, if you go to the same summer camp every year, you're there for 2 or 3 weeks, you leave and you don't see or have even any contact with those kids at the summer camp. And then the next year, like 80% of them are there again. And you just instantly fall back into, oh, that's Stevie, you fall back into it. And it's like no time has passed. And it was like that.
Did you think that's how it was going to go?
I had no idea. I really was like, I wonder if I hope everyone's still nice. I mean, we all kept in touch and we were all still friends. And we all, when we worked on the show, we all worked together very well. And, it was sort of like, oh, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be like that. But you never know.
I have some fan questions. Can we fire through them?
Yeah.
What's the most unexpected thing that came from the show's success?
For me, being listened to. Honestly.
As a creative? Or
as a creative, being listened to.
Even when you were an actor, though, you didn't have that?
No, I mean, you have to be a big star before people will listen to you.
Oh.
And I also, when writing was where I was like, there's something about what I make that people don't quite understand. And like, there's so much stuff, like when we're rehearsing and I'm putting it on his feet, it's like, people are sort of like laying there and it's like, well, yeah, because you're not doing this and you need to do this and you need to do that. And there's like this very specific way that things have to be with a lot of the stuff I write. There are really specific ways that that's the only way it works. And a lot of times I was not in a position, like I'd write something and it wouldn't work because, they weren't saying it right or they weren't in the right position or they weren't having the right intensity. And they were just going like, it doesn't work. Stop fighting for it. And I knew it would work. And, when the pilot came out and the, critics were so kind about it, that was my feeling, was like, see if I can just get people to listen to me. I mean, I'm saying this with full recognition that it sounds like what it is, which is a megalomaniac's thing. But for, what I'm writing, it has to be a specific way. It just does, because otherwise no one likes it. And if I can get it exactly the way I want it, then some people will like it.
Would you ever do another show?
I was too old for it when I did this last go through. It's a really draining job the way I do it. And I wish it wasn't I wish I could do it a different way, but I'm not I don't have the psychological maturity to do it in a less, compelled sort of obsessive way. there are tons of people who do brilliant work who it doesn't require that. That's just what I require of myself for some fucking bad reason. But I don't think so.
I've been fortunate enough to speak to Frankie, Justin, and Alex Reed, and they all say how incredibly hands-on and that you are the backbone of the show.
Well, I'm certainly the hands of the show. I don't know if I'm the backbone. I would say the cast are the backbone and a lot of the other parts of the body of it, but I'm certainly hands-on everything. And again, I don't know how not to be and still do a good job.
What if, I feel like the revival was written in a way where it can continue on. Maybe the main cast took a little step back and it focused on Malcolm's daughter.
Well, that was the thing that let me write it, because I really feel like everything we had done, we had said everything in multiple different ways. And there weren't any ideas. And that's why I resisted doing it for years and years. I didn't have a good idea. And by good idea, I mean, it's something that then I know what to write. A good idea may not even be something that stays in it. Maybe it goes by the wayside, but it's something that lets me start writing, because it sparks other ideas. And the one that was this one, my wife Tracy gave it to me, who you should have on the show. Apparently, she said, he's not interviewing enough women.
I'd love to interview her.
That you should. She's a better interview than I am.
You can set it up.
She doesn't run on as long as I do. But she gave me the idea. She said, what if Malcolm has a daughter that's exactly like him? And I was just like, oh, fuck, that kid would be miserable. Oh, my God, that's great. And it was just sort of like, okay, well, then that gives us this, like, of Malcolm feel like her complaining to him about, like, I have your personality. And that's so that is so mean of you to have this person, and how unfair it is. And I like that sort of thing. And I like the idea of him feeling guilty about something he could not control. And I like the idea of him really working to be a good father and how that doesn't even help. And I was like, I could see all that stuff. So I knew I wanted to explore that. And it was great with, when we auditioned Keeley, we were seeing a lot of kid actors, and some kids were funny and some kids were, good actors, but it was the same thing that we were worried about with Frankie. And this time it was really difficult. And it took a long time before we saw Keeley, who could do that kind of thing where she could really nail a joke, but you could really feel for her and you really believed her when she was saying how lonely she was and how bereft she was and how like unfair it all felt. Like you knew this kid was kind of like in pain and really trying and flailing to, have some friends.
That Zoom call in the closet was so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just sort of like, it wasn't, and it was her saying how everything was fine, was what I liked about that. And it was just the way she was acting it that was so sort of like awkward and painful that it makes Vaughn click off the call. Like I'm not listening to it. So that was great. And I really liked, Tristan as a character. Like I really thought about like, okay, well, what's the kind of girl that's like really good for Malcolm, and it's good for her, but you also have to understand why she's in it. It isn't just like, so she isn't a prop. She isn't just like, well, this is the girl Malcolm should be with. Because it's like, well, why should she be with him? And figuring that out was fun. Like, what is it that like someone with that personality, what's attractive about it to a girl, especially to a girl that, is good for him, that you want the audience to feel like he should be with this girl. And like, if that's in jeopardy, that they're like, fuck, he's got to fix this.
Did you ever go down the road for Reese to be a chef?
No, it didn't seem honest. It felt like that's a guy. And I mean, there's plenty of chefs who are, kind of despicable and dishonest. But it just felt like he would have been caught out, that he wasn't, it's been a long enough time that like he would have had that and then screwed it up. It just didn't feel like that was where that worked for creating the rest of these stories. I really like the idea that you would kind of feel, we tried to really make the betrayal of Hal kind of really sting more than those things usually do, that it's on the back of, Hal feeling like he's really helping his son, and that like that's sort of like the fun of it. And then felt like that he was doing this elaborate thing to humiliate his dad for money. We just felt like, okay, that's right on the edge of too contrived, but man, it's really fucking stinky of him to do that. And he wouldn't have needed to do that if he was having a successful career as a chef. Yeah, and I liked the Francis thing with, having a kid, especially I just thought it was such a good joke after they come back and, Malcolm's got this secret daughter, and he's, guess who's having a baby? So I kind of liked the one thing that I said in the pitch for it when I was pitching in the studios, Malcolm's different now because he's gone through this and he's older and he's been away from the family. So now he's, worked on himself and he's done this, and Hal's got this bandwidth now. So he's having those sort of normal existential questions that come up at that age. And Lois has not changed one bit, and she never will, which felt right for the character, that she is the same. She was fine when she was 30 and she's fine now that she's 60. It's like nothing needs to change. She's good.
Were you pitching to fans of the show that were now execs over at Disney and Hulu?
A lot of them were fans, and some of them, they weren't quite old enough to have their kids on them yet. Like their kids are all like 5 and under, and so they were fans of the show, and they're, mostly they were fans of my wife, Tracy. Like a lot of them were people she had hired, decades back as an executive and had trained them. And they just sort of like, she's their mentor.
How'd you meet your wife?
She was the executive on the show, on the pilot.
And that's where you guys met, on that pilot?
We met working on that pilot and all of the sort of pre-production and, getting it sold. I had written the script and her company was like, we want to try and sell this, our studio. It's like, here, no one else does, so have at it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What lessons, experiences did you take from Little House on the Prairie and apply to creating Malcolm in the Middle?
Oh, not so much to creating, but the way the show ran. The big ethical compromise of show business. And, we don't pollute, much any more than like the job isn't a pollution creating job, Most of the time there's some, awareness or, at least attention paid to, issues about, social justice and stuff. We exploit child labor. And it doesn't matter that it's in a nice studio setting and not in the sweatshop. Little kids should not be full-time employees. They should not have adult kind of jobs and adult kind of responsibilities. And I think it can be very harmful to a kid to be in that situation where they're supporting the family and they're sort of the authority figure or power figure in a family, and they're like 9. They're not equipped to handle it. And it's, so we did everything we could to make the kids and the parents of the kids, most importantly, realize like, these are kids. We're going to treat them like kids. We're not going to call their agents if they show up 5 minutes late because they were, busy playing or finishing their thing. We're not going to give them lectures about like what they need to do. We're not going to tell the teachers that like they have to delay school a little bit and keep it quiet because, we need to get this shot in, like we had, the rules were like, these are kids. We fought every one of these laws. We follow to the letter. We don't know AD is going to like subtly bully a teacher to like, add 5 minutes to the classroom time that they didn't do or any of that. And even so, I think with Eric, he felt damage from being on that show, after he was off it. I think that, the other kids luckily did really well, and they all had good parents. I mean, they all had, and Eric especially, like.
Do you think because they were a little older?
No, I think it's just one of those things like where the parents are good and some of it is luck and, but I think the deck is stacked against them, coming off of a show like that where you're just sort of in this unreal experience and you're around grownups more than you are around other kids, which I think is really weird and it can be very hampering because, you sort of expect other kids after you spent, 2 years only being around grownups and then you're back to being around kids and you're expecting them to act like grownups do in terms of, being solicitous to you. And you don't realize that there's sort of like, there's a code switch that happens, with when you're playing with your friends and when you're around adults, even fun adults. So that I think has always been like a thing that I carry out because I saw Michael was really good about that with the kids and the hours were set up so that the kids could be kids.
On Little House.
Michael Landon. And he ran the show. He had it organized enough that those situations where, we're not going to get a shot with the kid because the kid says we have to come home and we, wasted time on this other thing. And now we're going to ask the kid to, waive his rights. That never happened because, and it was sort of like, we have to get this organized in a way to make sure we get our stuff on time. And we're not, even tempted to ask the kids or their parents to bend the rules a little bit, which worked out.
Justin mentioned too that that's almost where the Francis storyline came in because he was not a kid. So when the kid's time ran up, you leaned into Francis's story.
That's why we couldn't bring him home very often, even though it would have been nice to bring him home. I mean, my brother never came home. The rift between him and my mom was just too big. And the original conception of the show is we never saw him. It was just like they would read letters from him.
Oh, he was just like there, but
he was disappeared like it was, 1970s Chile. Chile, the country, for those of you too young to remember, people would be disappeared. And, it's a very nice romantic sort of gesture. And I thought it was very poignant that, these kids were sort of had this longing for this person who was gone. And I still think that, but it was not fun to watch, like it was so sad and it made everything have, too sinister of a turn for something that was on Sunday after The Simpsons, Sunday night, like, oh, fun show. And he was such a sort when I made that change and put him in, like he was such a source of good jokes and good laughs. And there were other things that I thought were more valuable that you got, this sort of, off-kilter crusader, just sort of like snap judgments, but, sort of, thinking of himself and kind of being really like this warrior for the oppressed, against injustice. Those were other themes that I liked equally well, and they were less sort of like ugly to be around.
Right. Did you expect Dewey to be as loved as he was?
No. I mean, I didn't expect anybody to be as loved as they were, and Eric was just so charming, like we were talking about doing an episode where it was an early episode where they have a babysitter who's really cute and they're all sort of like in love with her and they're sort of competing for her attention. And, Malcolm and Reese are doing all this convoluted stuff. And, Dewey is like, I can dance. And we wrote, he does barely any dance at all that's not a dance. And then we just wrote in the dialogue, Dewey chanting, going boopy, 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 boopy. And it was like the whole point of it was supposed to be just the most stupid, like, that's not charming. And then, her going like, oh my God, that's so charming, But it was, when he did it, he just sort of gave it this jazz thing, and it was so fucking charming. Like, well, it still works, it's not the same joke, but like, and he just ended up having that thing where, it's like his voice and the way he looked that, and his sort of like this, almost like nursery rhyme way of talking, that was so sort of like fun to listen to. A lot of the way, when he was, everything, he sort of talked like this, and everything was up high, and
It's Money Day.
Yeah. Everything just sounded so light and cheerful coming out of him that it was just, didn't matter what he was saying. I mean, when he was saying something like, every year I have no expectations and I'm still disappointed.
That changed my life,
Yeah,
that quote.
it's like,
I
what he's
expect
saying
nothing,
is-
and I'm still let down.
Yeah. It's just, there's those kind of things you can't plan or work for. Those are things that you hope for, but you don't have any way of saying, like, if we do this and we do this, then we can have that. Those are just sort of, that's what's great about this business. It's like those accidents where you just feel like, fuck, if we hadn't tried this, that wouldn't have happened. And even though we weren't expecting it, if we hadn't done this, we wouldn't have gotten that nice surprise.
Did you expect magic like that with when Reese goes to military school? He shaves his head. He's willing to do anything.
No, that was, I do remember, like, I thought, you know what? Shaving the head of a series regular
Crazy.
hasn't been done. That's just something that wouldn't happen. So I think that'll be really shocking.
Did that kill off the frosted tips too?
I don't remember if he ever brought him back. I don't think so. I think he decided that was it. But, he's just like cute 17-year-old boy. And I was just like, okay, look, Justin, this is going to be great. He was like, really? I said, yeah, do that. That's never happened. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to get a lot of publicity and, publicity for you. And I said, look, I'll shave my head first. Because that was the other thing. I had a deal with the actors that I wouldn't ask them to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself. Which resulted a few times, it's me like doing things that, I really didn't want to do, but that fair was fair. So before
do you have any examples?
Well, getting my I had this long, beautiful head of magnificent hair, and sat in a barber chair, like in the same set, and had we had an Army guy who had done it, hundreds of times. I said, just do me the thing, but start in the middle so it has that. And he did, and I looked at Justin and said, "You happy now?" He was like, "Not yet." They shaved the whole thing off, and then he did it. I love the joke where he has this groove down the middle of his head, and he goes, "If you stop now, I think I can still work with this." Like that blind hope. I did the bees. I
you did the bees yourself?
I didn't do the whole thing, but while he was there, I stood 3 feet away from him, and I had them put like a shovel full of bees in my hand, and I'm nervous around bees. And I was like within 3 feet of him the whole time. And fucking, which one was it? I had these bees on me. Oh, it was Al Higgins, fucking Al Higgins. Snuck up behind me, and he had like a little piece of grass, and he like tickled my ear.
Terrible.
And I just like, and like the thing with bees is as long as you don't squish them, they're fine. Like,
so you didn't get stung?
I actually did not. Bryan got stung once, I think, when they were vacuuming them off him. He got stung once in the crotch because I think the vacuum nozzle sort of squeezed one of the bees. But yeah, they just said, it's like when people are sort of doing this, or they see one and they do that, that's when or they step on it. That's when they get stung, is because you're pressing on their bodies. Oh. I managed to escape that, but that was the least. We asked a lot of stuff from them.
Another quote that changed my life was when Reese goes, "I just turned my brain off and everything's okay."
Yeah,
that was a very valuable lesson.
Makes your breath fresh.
Yeah. What is it?
The Minty Mints song.
What was that?
Minty Mints are your breath's friend. It's just some, that's the jingle because it's just so mindless. And Dan Kopelman just made up that song as a jingle. I was like, that sounds like a real jingle. So we actually had to check and make sure, is he unintentionally stealing something? And nope. But we ended up, it's a real earworm too. Like everyone on the show find themselves going, God damn it.
Boopy boopy always got stuck in my head.
Yep.
Boopy boopy What do you do now? Like, how are you spending your time now? The revival's over.
I started a charity years ago, almost 10 years ago now, called Healing California. And it does, there's a real big gap in the healthcare system, especially for veterans and completely for homeless people. And there's also like 20,000 homeless veterans in California, which, it's appalling. It's what's the way someone put it, which I agree with, is, it's not a problem. It's a fucking disgrace. But Healing California, we have volunteer dentists and volunteer eye doctors. And the VA doesn't have great prescription eyeglass coverage or very good dental coverage. And there's long, long waits for that. So we have these volunteer dentists and volunteer eye doctors, and we have all this field equipment, portable field equipment. And we go out and have clinics, we go out where they are. And they come in, they get their teeth fixed, they get an eye exam, get eyeglasses that we make on site. And so instead of waiting a year and a half for their glasses, their prescription's already changed by the time they get them. They come in and they walk out with glasses, and, there's nothing fancy about it. There's nothing complex about it. It's just something that, people shouldn't have toothaches and people should be able to see. It's healingca.org.
How often do you guys do
donut
it?
Button. We try and do one once a month. Sometimes we'll do more. Sometimes we, maybe 8 weeks or 7 weeks will go by. A lot of it depends on the host that's doing it. We go into existing events. Like there will be a homeless resource event, where they, they'll have a lot of aid groups will put up tents and either, for counseling or drug rehab, or they sometimes will have like a court where a judge will come in and just sort of dismiss, vagrancy charges from 10 years ago so they can get a job or get a driver's license. And we just go in there. And since the event's already going, we don't have to pay for publicity or insurance or, catering or security or any of those other things. So we can just go in at a very low cost. So your money goes very far. Anything you donate goes straight to treating patients. HealingCA, www.healingca.org. There's a big donate button.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a really easy fix. It's very productive. There's no what is the benefit of that? It's like people can see and people's teeth get fixed.
Yeah.
That's the impact. That's the knock-on effect. It's very simple, very easy. So just donate.
Did you ever enlist in anything in the military branches?
No, I got so lucky with that. I knew from the time I was 10 that if I was put in the Army, I would just spend time in the Army jail, the brig, I think it's called. That I was just, I can't follow orders. Even, like smart people telling me to do stuff. I was like, and I knew that's, that makes sense that's what you do in the Army is you follow orders. And I just knew I'd be in trouble. And they had, I don't know if you know how the draft worked. Like when I was a kid, Vietnam was still going on. And, I was way too young to be drafted, but they had a birthday lottery. And every year they would have a list in the newspaper of what the birthdays were in what order. So on one year, they'd had 365 golf balls, and they say the first number is June 10th. And, ball would come, and this one is February 1st. And
if
so
you were
the
born
birthdays,
on that day,
that was like the order that they would call people up. And for 10 years, like from the time I was 8 until or 9 years, 17. I was 17 when they stopped doing the drafting, although the 1As were turned to 1H. But my number was always 12 and 15. And if you were at 100 or below, you were going in. And anything above that, maybe you wouldn't get called, depending on how many people they were calling up. And my brother, Brian, every year I'd be 50 or 12 or whatever, and he'd be like 310, 297 every fucking year. And it was like, God damn it, I'm going. Then finally they stopped before I had to go in. But,
yeah, it's funny.
But I was not, and I think it's good for the world that I never was.
I agree.
Would have been a big waste of resources to try and make me into a fit serviceman.
This has been awesome getting to talk to you.
Likewise, this is really fun.
Thanks so much for coming. And if Tracy wants to do a podcast, I'd love to chat with her.
Do it, man.
Awesome. Go check out your organization.
Yep. Healing California, healingca.org.
And now you're just hanging out?
Now I'm just hanging out. I'm just sitting in a chair much like this, staring at the walls from the time I wake up to the time I power off at bed. It's really sad. It's so sad for me.
Linwood, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you.
Cool. See you guys. That was great.